2,000 years ago, the Roman state publicly executed a political dissident. 3 days later, his body vanished. Humanity has been polarized by this event ever since. If the account is true, it is a miracle. If it is false, we are looking at the most successful and enduring conspiracy in history. To understand the theories, we have to look at this location as a crime scene. We have a victim, a guarded tomb, and missing physical evidence. By applying forensic logic, we can systematically test every alternative theory against the historical record. The oldest alternative theory dates back to the day the tomb was found empty. The stolen body hypothesis argues the disciples conducted a nighttime heist to fake a resurrection. This requires untrained fishermen to silently move a 2-ton stone past an elite Roman guard unit. In the Roman military, sleeping on watch carried the death penalty. These soldiers were not likely to sleep through the loud, heavy labor of rolling back a stone. What if the authorities moved the body themselves? 50 days after the execution, when the disciples began preaching in Jerusalem, the Roman or Jewish leaders could have ended the movement by simply producing the corpse. They didn't, which suggests they didn't know where the body was either. Some suggest Jesus simply passed out on the cross and later woke up in the tomb. However, records note a spear was thrust into his side, bringing forth blood and clear fluid. Modern medicine identifies this as pleural effusion, clinical proof of death by trauma and asphyxiation. Even if he had survived, he would have awoken in pitch darkness, wrapped in sticky resin and linen. A half-dead man would not have had the strength to push away a massive stone and fight off guards. Theories requiring human intervention fail to account for the physical realities of Roman military discipline and the effects of crucifixion. If the body was dead and not stolen, we must look at psychological theories, specifically the claim that the disciples experienced a mass hallucination. Bereavement hallucinations are a documented phenomenon, but they are internal and individual. There is no psychiatric record of 500 people sharing the same interactive sensory experience at the exact same time. Furthermore, a trick of the mind does not explain why the tomb was vacant. Some argue the story was a metaphor that only became a physical legend over several decades. This fragment represents a problem for the myth theory. Modern dating shows that the core claim of the resurrection was being preached within 3 to 5 years of the event. The timeline is too short for a slow-forming legend, and psychiatry does not support shared, simultaneous delusions. The crime scene also contained a shattered Roman seal. Breaking that seal was an act of high treason against the emperor, suggesting the perpetrators acted without any fear of the state. Inside, the grave clothes were collapsed and undisturbed. If the body had been dragged out, the wrappings would have been torn or taken. Instead, they appeared as if the mass inside them had vanished without moving the fabric. The Shroud of Turin is the most debated piece of evidence. Long called a medieval forgery, it bears a photographic negative image of a crucified man. Physicists discovered this 2D image contains perfect 3D topographical data, a property impossible to replicate by medieval painting or standard photography. The image was formed by dehydrating the topmost microfibers. Scientists can only replicate these results using high-frequency ultraviolet radiation for a fraction of a second. The data suggests that the image was formed by a release of energy rather than decay, a heist or a forgery. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote that once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Conspiracies require silence. Yet the witnesses to this event chose execution over recanting their story. While people will die for a lie they believe is true, they do not typically die for a lie they know they fabricated. This also accounts for the conversion of hostile witnesses. Paul, a persecutor, and James, a skeptic, both joined the movement and were executed for it. Neither man had a social or political reason to join the Christians. Finally, thousands of Jewish families suddenly abandoned the Sabbath, a core cultural pillar for centuries, to worship on Sunday instead. This shift in behavior and the willingness to face death suggests the witnesses were convinced of what they had seen, a conviction strong enough to override their ancestral traditions and their instinct for survival. When analyzed critically, every alternative theory faces significant contradictions in the historical or medical records. The skeptic must accept that hundreds of people shared the same hallucination, that the authorities were unable to produce a body they likely possessed, and that the first records of the event appeared before a legend could grow. For the historian, the case remains open. It is a set of historical data, a guarded tomb and a missing body, that lacks a standard explanation for how this movement began. The question remains, was this the greatest conspiracy in history, or the moment the author of life stepped back into creation?